Okay, guys, I guess I have to apologize because we had a technical glitch and we accidentally got booted off of Zoom. So, we're just going to pick up where we left off, and hopefully all of our previous verbiage has been recorded. We don't know. We will not know until Joe checks
But
into it.
really,
But
it's such great stuff. I mean, if it's not there, it really was Javi opened up the world to us. I've never learned so many amazing things. So hopefully, it's still there.
I,
yeah, yeah, and he talked you into to drinking strychnine, so that's always a benefit.
well, probably
Um,
probably good that it's not there then because of legal repercussions. Yeah.
yeah, all right.
I'm more of a
Nico,
hemlock fan. I'm kind of old school like that.
we
Oh,
already know
look at you.
you missed out on the messages last week, Javier. We know who Joe's really a fan of, but we're not going to go
Oh,
there right
oh
now.
my.
Oh yeah, no, you don't want to know. Is
Not a
Nico
reference
back
to.
on?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I can't see. Uh, yeah, well, I was just wanted to blow smoke a little bit of, Javier is just such a wonderful instructor, great martial artist, grappler, and he's been there for me through my health issues, or through my breakups, and you
I mean,
know,
you've been there for me too. So
yeah, well,
like we
I
had
love the
said,
guy.
like we had said, Tony was there during the dissolution of my first marriage.
Yes. Oh man, I mean, and we can laugh at it now, but it was just, it was just unbelievable, and I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I can only imagine you on the other end. Like you had to think I was joking at first, right?
yeah, yeah. And then when I realized you weren't, I was like dumbfounded. I was in a state of shock. Well, I don't know she's coming back. I'm like, okay, what? Like, wait a minute, what? And I'm thinking, okay, maybe her car broke down or something happened, and and then he's going on. I'm like, this, I can't believe this, And
And at the
then
time, neither could I.
no, oh no, and then as the months and turned into years go by, and I'm hearing details of her life on the road, let's say, whatever. I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear no more of this, man. This is, but
But
that's
yeah, but best not to talk about that. Let's talk about
no,
positive things.
yeah. Well, you met a wonderful woman subsequently, absolutely wonderful, and you also met your current wife. I'm joking. I met his wife. Karen is a lovely lady, wonderful person. I remember, I think Martin and I went. Martin was my date to your wedding, as a matter of
Yeah, yeah.
fact.
He looked good in that dress too.
Oh goodness, he was another one of the legends of the old tool and die shop. Well, he got his own legend from being the star of the Lucky 13. Man, that's what made him. Just he was a robot. Um,
Yeah, no,
one of the
just off the hook on the conditioning. Just,
Yep.
just built up incredible cardio. Like uh, I wasn't I wasn't much when I came to you. I was short and kind of doughy. Like Martin was tall and thin, and like I would say on average, if you looked at the two of us, most people would pick Martin as having like this ideal build for grappling: long arms, long legs, real good for triangle chokes and darce chokes and all these other things. Arms as sharp as razor blades. Like he had just like a good build for it, and yeah, to like see him grow and pack on some muscle and get into like crazy good shape from being like a desk jockey computer programmer. It was like a really inspiring thing. Like and the worst thing was like he started making his best physical progress while I was laid up with the leg injury. So yeah, he just left me in the dust.
Well, he was good with the head scissors. That was his thing. The chokes with his legs, he was really good at that. And because of his conditioning and how good he ended up getting, um, defensively, especially, we had certain, professionals that would come through that couldn't tap him out because, he was just conditioning plays a big role in things. But I always tell people it's not just conditioning, because if conditioning was all you needed, then Jack LaLanne would have been the toughest guy that ever lived. You have to have the right techniques. It's got to be a marriage. Everything has to be working in symphony. You have to have the right kind of conditioning, and Martin had the absolute right kind of conditioning for fighting. He wasn't a powerlifting strong guy. He was cardio and aerobic and anaerobic strength. That's where his, that's. I mean, he just gravitated, man, to it.
No, there were
Uh,
and like, fortunately for a good length of time, Martin was my main training partner just because of the way things worked out. And as a result, like he would tap people that, I mean, I had to learn how to keep up with him, but he would tap people basically just through like just attrition, like they couldn't keep up with him. You put a pace on a guy, and he could keep it and they couldn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. He wasn't a natural for the submissions. You're right. It was his conditioning that, and hey, any port in a storm, but everybody has an interesting background. We'd love to have him on here. He's shy, but we'd like to get him on here for sure. But that's
No better reason to hear him say frontage road.
yeah, frontage. Oh man, or I gotta say it. I'm going to say it. The other one.
No, let
Oh,
him say
oh,
it.
okay, all right. I'll let
Save
him
that
say
for
it. I
his
won't.
episode.
All right, I won't do it. I won't do it. But
That man has a family.
yeah, who would have thought that, man? I always remember him saying, "I just want to live to see when they push the button in the nuclear bombs in World War III and we all die." I remember when that was his main goal in life. Okay, but speaking. Okay, so I think this would be a good time for you to clarify for people out there. Maybe you have a better way of approaching it, because when I get asked this question, it'd be better for you to answer it, I think. So a
Okay.
lot of people ask, what's the difference between my style of catch wrestling and the other styles of catch wrestling from like England and shit? I think because you have a bit of a background with that, you would probably be the best to explain it, and this would be important for people out there.
So, yeah, I think there's some distinct stylistic differences in terms of like technique selection. A lot of so it's weird because like when we look at it, the majority of the guys that I see that are currently, that attribute their art as catch wrestling, um, a lot of them learned from like Billy Robinson or Carl Gotch or one of their students. So I'd say there's a lot of, in Japan and in certain parts of the U.S., there's a lot of that influence, and they of course came from the same gym. They're snake pit trained athletes originally. So I see a lot of similarities in the technique selection that they do. Like the way they grip up on a double wrist lock is wildly different from the way that we do it. And like, I suppose back in the day, I primarily contributed that to like a difference between like the European and American styles, because I felt like, again, only seeing this in like books and whatnot, but I felt like John Pesek, for example, used a very similar grip sequence for the double wrist lock and the way he would grip the hand and whatnot to how you did it. Luthez did it the same way as you did it. So like I felt that that was probably an American thing, but maybe it's actually more of a gym thing than like,
Yeah.
a difference of like American versus European. But yeah, so this is a pretty hard subject to cover, like without going into like very specific examples. And like if somebody wants the specific examples, I feel like you've already covered the topic pretty well in the show no go.
Well, all right, maybe
Or
then we'll then, and then some of this has to be demonstrated as well.
right, it's kind of
But
hard to talk around. But
for
the
sure, its strategy is completely different. That
right.
that was
The,
all 100% entertainment wrestling, show wrestling. Whereas
right. So
where I came
a lot
from
of show
wasn't.
holds,
Yeah.
a lot of show holds. Some of them being passed off as legitimate holds, perhaps due to not knowing any better, and others just being like a variation that maybe, in my estimation, doesn't work as well. And then of course obviously there are legitimate holds that they're doing that perhaps they're doing them different setups, different ways. But the other thing that I think is kind of noteworthy is I feel like the actual baseline wrestling skills are often different in different lineages of catch wrestling. So like we have a very freestyle folk style base for our wrestling skill with the way you do it, and your ability to chain submissions and whatnot is at least in part about, based upon the way that like Nelsons and hammerlocks and those other aspects work in even the amateur styles of wrestling, I feel. So that's a big factor as well. If you're just coming into it, like obviously not everyone's the same here, but like if you were just to start, Joe's catch wrestling over here and like only want to learn the submissions, it maybe is entirely possible that they would let you do that. Whereas you adamantly refused to let us have any fun with the submissions until you felt we could legitimately wrestle to them and understood how to chain to and from them. So like,
Yeah.
I felt like that was a big factor as well.
20 some years ago, Bruce Lee, somebody asked him that, and he posted this on the forum back then. He said,
I think I remember this. Yeah.
yeah, we wrestle from hold to hold. And if you watch some of the other styles, they don't wrestle from hold to hold. I mean, again, we're painting with a broad brush. There's individuals that may do that. But in general, there's not that wrestling because it wasn't needed. And I think that was part of one of the problems when the Gracies went over there, or Gracie stylists to Japan and started to have their way. They were very successful going up against those shoot wrestler types because they weren't wrestlers really. They were
Right.
guys that knew submissions. Some of them were very talented though.
But then you have a guy like Sakuraba who actually did have an extensive wrestling background.
Right.
Also, obviously in his era, very innovative, very exciting and whatnot. But again, you've got a guy like Sakuraba, really, really understands wrestling, is a legitimately good grappler and was able to take those techniques and integrate them into an overall style that was very effective.
Absolutely. And that's where, pretty much where I was leading to. When you had the guys that were more entertainers, performance, or maybe martial artists, or, but from a different style. And even some that maybe had some wrestling, but couldn't put the connection together, made for a big deal. And like I said, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, actually, 25 years ago or whatever, I was trying to tell the people, it's different. What they're doing, that style is not what I teach. It's not as severe because it didn't need to be. Just like boxers have different styles. Jiu-jitsu schools probably have different styles. Judo, it's different. And my approach or my instincts are completely different because mine was all about learning how to do it at the highest level and for real. Like you don't lose the belt, you don't lose the match, you lose your life. So for me, nothing was more serious than this. And that's why a lot of times it was hard in the gym. A lot of times I'm sure you guys didn't have fun because I was a killjoy because I'm like, damn it, this shit's serious. You don't need to be messing around here. Take this for real.
I mean, the overall atmosphere of the training was generally pretty serious. Which is not to say we didn't have fun, but I would say, again, painting with a very broad brush here, but having been to a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms, having been to a lot of judo dojos, I would say, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, tends to be like a more laid-back, lax environment. There's a lot of joking around. Guys are chilling on the edge of the mat. When we were there to put in work. And to this day, this influences the way that I even talk about the way I teach martial arts, because I will tell my guys, like, we're here to do work. And this is not to say that I'm not, I actually, do joke around with my guys and whatnot, but when it's time to be serious, it's time to do work. That's how I always explain the work. But another thing to kind of keep in mind, I feel, and again, I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here, because not that I'm not still at least somewhat involved in the catch wrestling community, but like the catch wrestling community is way different now all these years later than it was when I first started, and it was, much smaller, very different arguments, although some of those same arguments are still there, I guess. Uh, uh, but um, but yeah, I just feel like the overall approach was you were less concerned about like winning gold medals. You know, you those of us that wanted to compete, you encouraged it, and you obviously wanted us to do well. But like, it was definitely more focused on like real altercations. You know, things that you would do to end a fight permanently or quickly, versus like the sort of attitude of anyone can do this. Jujitsu is for everyone is a real common expression. Certain gyms definitely have a more carefree and easygoing style than others.
Well,
And
and also don't forget, and it still holds true to a degree today, the vast majority of my techniques were not allowed in any of those tournaments back then. I mean, first of all, most of them just completely outright forbid leg locks, but just the way that we do the leg locks or the neck cranks or the twisting locks, even to this day, can't be done. Can't do it this way, your way, blah, blah, blah.
so let me
It's
speak.
frustrating.
Yeah, let me speak on that because like I've competed in a lot of different tournament formats. So we've got a lot. Jiu-jitsu is weird in this way because like you know judo basically has like one rule set. Like freestyle wrestling is this internationally regulated sport. It's got one rule set, so on and so forth. Jiu-jitsu does not have like this universal governing body, and it doesn't quite have like a universal rule set either. So you've got a lot of different formats, tournament formats that allow different rules. Now at the lower belt levels, say like white belt and blue belt in gi jiu-jitsu, and in many cases no gi jiu-jitsu, but let's talk about gi jiu-jitsu for just a minute here. The only leg lock that would be allowed would be an ankle lock, and you're not allowed to reap the leg, which is when you step over and put outward pressure inward, which is basically the way you teach an ankle lock or a heel hook. You're not allowed to do knee bars, toe holds, or calf crushes, calf slices, whatever you want to call them, until brown belt.
Jeez.
And in gi jiu-jitsu, you're basically never allowed to do heel hooks, even though a toe hold and a heel hook are kissing cousins. Now in no gi, depending on the tournament, there's a lot of tournaments that will allow a lot more of those holds and will even allow like neck cranks and spine locks, which are otherwise generally not done in jiu-jitsu. Obviously, we have tournaments like ADCC, which is a submission grappling style, and their rule set is intended to be, open to the many different styles of grappling. They basically allow anything, very anything goes in terms of that. And now, just this year, this is brand new. The IBJJF, probably the biggest jiu-jitsu organization, is now going to allow heel hooks and reaping for brown and black belts in no-gi, but only in the adult divisions. You can't do it in the masters divisions. So you gotta compete with the 20-year-olds basically to have those rules. So does not apply to the gi, and IBJJF is generally known more for their gi competitions than anything else. And again, only applies for brown and black belts in adult division. So if I wanted to go and do like an IBJJF no gi world championship, and I want to be allowed to do heel hooks, despite the fact that I'm, a black belt, I would need to go in with guys that are probably 20 years younger than me to do that. But that's a brand new rule just this year. It like, we'll see if that changes over time again.
Okay, good. That's, pretty much
It's a start.
Yeah, well, it's too late now, but they could have done this.
Oh yeah.
25 years ago. They could have been training with me and they would all been world beaters, but, and then now when you add the rips and everything else, which is just, and the whole approach of going after a submission, it changes everything. So like one of the problems with what Javier is saying, and this is really bad, is that, okay, let's say now all of a sudden you're a brown belt, and now they throw these things. Okay, now you can start doing these things. Well, you should have been doing those things from the very beginning because it will alter everything. Okay, it shouldn't be like you're making something and you're throwing this on top. It has to be blended in and baked in because from day one, if I realize we'll use his terminology, that a reaping heel hook can happen to me, then I am going to monitor my legs and I'm going to attack you and approach you in a completely different way. Now, if I'm told you don't have to worry about that for now, well, then I'm going to get lazy with my stuff. And to prove that this exists, you take good amateur wrestlers, okay? We're talking very good amateur wrestlers who have never done submissions, especially back then when they weren't 20 years ago when they didn't even see submissions.
Right.
And they were getting tapped out because they were letting their arms dangle or, what have you, their neck.
Well, most guys, that come to any grappling style that has submissions from like an amateur folk style, freestyle background, they're going to shoot. Their head's not in good position to defend something like a guillotine. They're going to easily give up their back and get their back taken and get choked out. They're going to get triangled, not realizing they're in danger. Those things happen constantly because they don't have the submission awareness. And that same problem happens with conventionally trained jiu-jitsu athletes when their coach is like, we're not going to teach leg locks until a certain point. We're not going to show, this move. Again, this is, for people that have the terminology, hopefully this will be clear, but like, I like to do what in jiu-jitsu is called an omoplata. It's like a chicken wing with my leg. You demonstrate on the lost art of hooking. Unfortunately, I don't remember what you actually call it there, but the omoplata is a well-known move in jiu-jitsu. And one of the really common counters that I run into that basically happens from like white belt to purple belt, and I've seen relatively high-level coaches teach this, is guys will, you've got them in the omoplata, and the guys will step over your body to try and get their legs to the other side so that they're over in like a cross side on you with their arms still tangled up, and they're able to pull it out from there, and they feel relatively safe. And I warn guys all the time, I'm like, you're getting away with that right now because you're going against opponents that aren't allowed to toe hold you as you step over. And they'll be like, what do you mean? And then I'll show them, I'll just like grab up the toe hold as they step over and like, oh, I'm like, yeah, like this is not a good technique, period, really, but it's going to work for you because until brown belt, people aren't allowed to do the counter that's right there.
Well, let me throw something in there. And this will hit home with certain people that are listening. If you come from a classical, let's say classical piano background, you are taught to do your scales in a certain way. You're fingering. Everybody does it, generally speaking, the identical way. Very difficult. And a lot of jazz players do come from a classical background. Some don't. But there are certain scales or certain runs that use what is called jazz fingering. Okay. Now, if you're a jazz guy and you started out with that, you have no problem. But many classical players struggle because it's like different fingering. And while they can pull it off, it's not natural. It's uncomfortable. And that's part of the problem because for years they developed that muscle memory and now they're shown a different way. And it's, yeah, they may be capable of
It's a
doing
long
it.
learning curve.
It's a very long learning curve, and it will not become instinctual for you. So
yeah, I would say, and I've seen that it varies from gym to gym. Let's be very clear. I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here and like label everyone, but there are definitely some gyms that have that approach of we're not going to really expose the students to it until they're allowed to legally do it in competition. And I feel that's a terrible mistake because now you're behind the eight ball. If you're again, jiu-jitsu terminology here, if you're a fresh brown belt, you get your brown belt on Saturday, and the next week you're going to a tournament and your coach hasn't been teaching you any of those leg locks and other submissions that weren't legal because they weren't legal till then, you could go up against a guy who's been a brown belt for 4 years and has that, even if he just learned them day one as a brown belt, he's still got 4 years more experience of doing them than you do, So I always advocate, I find personally, and I've had a lot of success with this with athletes at the various gyms I teach at. I find it is better off to teach somebody something, make sure they have a firm understanding of, especially understand mechanically how to defend it. Okay. So that they don't get injured, doing something crazy in a situation that they think they're safe and they're not. But, and then it's easier for me to say, okay, for this tournament, you can't do A, B, and C than it is for me to go, okay, you get a new shiny belt. And by the way, now you have to learn all this new stuff and change your game completely.
I agree with you. And I also think that's a problem with people who don't strike, who don't understand the importance of everything that comes into boxing. Let's say we'll stick with boxing, the head movement, the how to keep your hands, keeping your chin down, and all of that jazz, and the right way to throw punches. Because eventually, and it's has happened countless times, where people who just have grappling and they try to either go into an MMA thing or street self defense, they get their they get their asses beat because punches is like a whole new environment to them.
Right.
So you really have to have, I believe, more than a working knowledge, but at least a working knowledge. You have to be exposed to it, you know. And I know it's gotten a lot better through the years because 25 years ago, these schools were still like not even allowing takedowns. They were doing things from their knees, and I know that situation's improved.
That definitely still happens at some schools where more often what I see these days, very rarely will two guys start like on knees and like just wrestle from their knees, because I think most coaches realize that that's an unrealistic situation that does not happen even in jiu-jitsu. Like,
Right.
but even in the schools that don't prefer to work a lot of takedowns, I feel most of them will choose a situation where like one person is standing, the other person is performing, say, like an open guard, and we're working like a passing situation, standing versus open guard. Or we'll have like what's called double guard pull, where basically both people are seated and initiating techniques from there, because that also, kind of unique to jiu-jitsu happens. But I feel like it has definitely changed with time, and still very school dependent. Most competitors that try to have a rounded game will have some takedowns. And it also changes a little bit based on weight class, I feel, too. The lighter weight classes are, again, in jiu-jitsu, have this tendency to play a lot of bottom game, and not necessarily perfect their takedowns. Whereas, the heavyweights almost always want to be on top. So even if they don't get, like they have to at least be moderately proficient with takedowns. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where it's like two big guys just ramming horns over and over again until somebody falls over, gets tired, slips, whatever. And that would obviously be a terrible way to get it to the ground.
Well, to each his own. That's the path that certain people want to take. But I mean, I'm glad for the knowledge that I learned. I'm glad for the way that I learned. I wouldn't have it any other way because it works for me. It worked for the environment that I was in, and it just seems that my whole life I've been around caustic situations. As some of those
Right.
situations that I've been in, and they've been life and death, and it just is weird how many times it happens, but it happens.
Right.
But for others that are out there, and to me, I think one of the biggest things is people look at me like you mentioned earlier. Oh, Tony's a big guy, right? Well, the majority, I mean, almost every one of my students was not big at all. I mean, so you look
No.
at somebody like Javier. Um, we hope to have Paul Dodds on, who's from England. He's 140 pounds, 5'6", I believe. Martin was roughly the size of Hoist Gracie. Brian was the size of Hoist Gracie. You know,
Right.
none. These weren't like brutes. I mean, yes, I did have some guys that I trained that were in, like
I
Brian
mean,
Klaus, and but
yeah, I mean, Brian was a big dude, but
he
I
was
was gonna
gigantic.
say, I think out of all the regular students, Bruce obviously was
Yeah,
also one of the coaches, but
Bruce,
like
yeah.
out of the regular group of students, Costa was probably the biggest one of us, wasn't he?
Well, he
Like
wasn't. Yeah, he was just a lot.
no, he wasn't big, but like
No, right.
he was the next,
200.
like next to you, he was the next biggest guy, or maybe
Yeah.
Brian. I'd
Well,
have to see them next to each other.
the problem with Costa, and we want him on the show too, is that he had a bad back like mine. His back would go out, man. Then he'd put on weight. It was hard for him to, he'd gas out right away. He had no conditioning because he was always injured. And but Brian was lean, tall and lean. But my point is, these weren't Mister Americas. They were not gigantic guys. But I was really the only guy that was consistently 7 days a week over 200 pounds. Okay.
Right.
Um, but the thing though is the strikes are so important, and that nobody really got into that. Even the rips, we would lose so many people. They would work out with us for a while because I wouldn't introduce them to ripping on the first day because I knew they'd never come back. But even after they were there for a while, and then the rips, they started to get, okay, here's the day that you're going to get ripped. They knew that every day after that, rips are going to be a part of the wrestling. Yeah, 99% of them quit. They could not handle that because of the pain. Nobody was getting injured, but the pain of it, and it's also mentally demoralizing because you realize right away your submissions, the change is the way you can approach applying and maintaining a submission hold, because man, when you rip the right way, and you know it because you've been through it, you know that I mean, grown men, let's put it this way, grown men cry, and they cry like babies. It's that painful.
Yeah, no, it like there have been many occasions where I've been, asked to show somebody catch wrestling holds, and that is the part that I have to decide when I do it, whether I'm going to include it or not. Oftentimes I will demonstrate the hold, show it, 90% of the way that it would be done. And then after they get the fundamental, like say a top wrist lock, for example, and once they get the fundamental differences between, say, a top wrist lock and an Americana or Udigurami or whatever you want to call it, once they understand that, then I have to be like, okay, let me show you now how we would do this for real, and start ripping on the face and whatnot. And I just know from experience that if I showed that first, they wouldn't get through the technique.
Oh, like absolutely.
I have to show it at the end as you can add this on at the end to make it even meaner and more effective. But I would definitely lose them if I just started with that.
I 100% agree with you, and getting back again to the differences between styles, and not just other catch styles, but just jiu-jitsu and everything, judo, whatever. I'm more control oriented. I'm all about controlling the opponent. I don't care about the position necessarily. I'm painting with a broad brush there. Of course, I don't want to put myself in a bad spot, but I can show you how you can have the identical position. I've shown this many times where one slight, maybe imperceptible thing changes. And now I went from being controlled to being in control. And it's all about knowing how to control a person, making him do what you want him to do. And ripping is a part of it, but also the approach of the submissions. Since I use the whole body to attack, that changes my approach, and it changes my thought process. And people used to wonder, how can Tony get these submissions so quickly? Seconds. It's not because of my physicality, but because of my approach.
It's the setups.
It's the setups, and I have setups that I've never did a video. I don't think so. On setups, I may have shown a couple here.
You've definitely shown setups within the context of a given position,
but I never delved deep into it. But setups are like creating a song. Okay, it's all about consciousness, where I'm at, what energy I'm getting from you, how we're going about this, and all of my setups will be unique, perhaps like a pool match. You know the shots, but every game is slightly different. That's the beauty of it, and that's something that can't be taught via video. You have to be in person.
You mostly have to feel that to really understand.
You have to feel it and see me, watch me, and I have to see you, watch you, and start making you a little more aware of what the possibilities and potentialities are. And that's why what I do and what I've taught you guys can't be pigeonholed. It's so different that even these damn instructional videos don't really do it justice. That's why I push.
I would absolutely agree with you there. And one of the things that, like, above and beyond the fact you can't feel it, and there's little subtle details you might be missing that just aren't picked up on camera. Like it looks the same but doesn't feel the same is something I tell people all the time. Like, I'll get in there and be like, hey, you see how my shoulder's placed here? Well, right now, he can tell you that it's about to feel different, but you guys aren't going to be able to see it. Or I've got my hands locked in a particular way, but they're buried under my body. So you can't tell that my knuckles are going into his sternum right now, but I tell you they are, and he can definitely feel it. Whereas if I turn my hand over, now he's much more comfortable. Little things like that are very hard to pick up on video, or sometimes almost impossible to see because of just relative body positioning. And that's right. That's the stuff that you basically need in person to really fully understand, or you need a very, very detailed breakdown to kind of like explain it.
That's why I really push for the Tri-C program, the distance learning, especially now with the COVID, and that's going to be around for a while. All training has changed. I can do that now. I can make a video for you. After we've been training a while and we're exchanging videos, I can see and say, okay, here, blah 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 blah. It's really important. You can't. I hate to sound like a huckster here, like I'm selling, but I am, because you just can't get this anywhere else in the world. In 7 billion people, you can't, and that's when I was learning this, after an X amount of time with Stanley, and I can't tell you how long, but the light bulb, it clicked. I knew. I said, "You're not going to get this anywhere else." That happened to me twice. Well, kind of 3 times with Ronnie Moon, but really with Jerry Sigler here in Chicago with the accordion. No one in the world plays jazz accordion. No one, not one human being plays it like he does with those block chords. So I knew this is the only place that I'm going to learn how to do this, through him. And the same thing with Rodvan. This is the only way. This is the only place on planet Earth, that I can learn to do this as a kid. But and and this is the point that I try to get across to people. I'm not saying don't study with this guy or that guy or but you're not going to be able to get this. You can't just go to your phone book or online and Google some guy in your town that's going to teach you what I teach. You're a phenomenal instructor, and I'm glad that you're able to do it. You teach more people than I do. But I just can't get that point across to people enough. I just can't. And that's why I get infuriated when I see other people teaching stuff that I'm like, God, this is so not right. They're missing the bigger, picture. It's almost like going up to the world's greatest poet and saying, roses are red, violets are blue. I think you're cute, and so do I, or whatever. You're making up some gibberish, right? That's how I am. I mean, it's like, God, there's so much that these people are missing, and if they would just humble themselves and come to me for training, I could elevate them quickly and say, look, you need to train with me. I can magnify your abilities quickly. And for those who are just beginning, that's even better, because now I don't have any bad habits to have you unlearn.
Right. Yeah, no, that definitely complicates things. One of the things, like, and I do have like a pretty extensive martial arts background. Even after I started training with you, I still eventually pursued other martial arts. But one of the things that I found is kind of beneficial in that way is because I've trained so many different things and whatnot, it's relatively easy for me to slot things in for people where it's like, hey, you're doing things this way. Let me show you a little modification that will make that better. But at no point in time have I truly felt that I can just let's start with a blank canvas here, and I'm just going to show you everything, whole cloth, how we should do it. It's always, at best, I get most guys are interested in learning like that piecemeal approach. So I can never personally give them like the full picture is I guess what I'm saying.
That's how I felt.
Yeah. But for that, they need you.
Yeah. Well, I get it. But to add to that, even when you were at the gym through the years, we'd have a fighter come to train, but they're with me for 3 days, 4 days, or a week,
right.
A week or two before their fight. That's, I'll show them and I'll help them. And, some I trained a little bit more than that, but yeah, it's very difficult when you come to me last minute or this or that. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I feel in so many cases, like if you're not going to make a, and this applies to any component of mixed martial arts, like if you go to somebody for a limited period of time, you're probably looking for a magic bullet. If you're serious about it, you're going to dedicate years to it,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah. But I think people also, like, this is the weird thing. I think people overestimate how much time it's going to take to get good at something, and underestimate, like, well, maybe not underestimate, but like they think it's going to take 20 years to master something. And it's like, listen, man, we can get really, really good at something in a couple of years, so long as we're doing dedicated training. Like, you're not going to get any good at something if you're coming, if you put an hour a week into something, you're not going to get good at anything.
Right.
Wrestling is one of my favorite things to talk about with guys, because, and I run into this in jiu-jitsu, I've run into this in judo. So many guys will be like, damn it, I wish I wrestled in high school. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You did not wrestle in high school. And you see other guys that did, that have this clear advantage in physicality, toughness, balance, all these things, let alone the actual technical aspects of wrestling that allow them to do takedowns or the way they move on the ground. And you're like lamenting the fact that you didn't wrestle in high school and this guy did. But that guy wrestled in high school, maybe for only 4 seasons. Okay, we don't know if he had a more extensive background than that, but let's say he wrestled in high school for 4 seasons. Okay, that's 4 years, and only a couple of months out of each of those years. Okay, now the things that made him so good are presumably some proper training methodology. Okay, he's got a coach that breaks it down and gives him a good approach, so he's not just getting like random bullshit techniques thrown at him. Okay, drilling things correctly. Okay, and also, and I feel this is a really important point that people don't realize in other sports, a lot of competition in a very compact window. So during that wrestling season, a guy might have more matches in a single wrestling season than a competitor in, say, jiu-jitsu might have in a couple of years of jiu-jitsu competition, just because the volume of, doing multiple meets a week, getting multiple matches each time, whereas some relatively competitive athletes in jiu-jitsu might only do like a competition once a month, once every couple of months, and they might get only a few matches at each competition depending on how they do. So those things combined, you're looking at a guy who's a high school wrestler, air quotes on that, who's got maybe 4 years of serious experience. It's not like he dedicated 30 years of his life. So if you go in like as a jiu-jitsu guy and you feel like you wished you wrestled in high school, all you're telling me is that you would like to dedicate, you should be thinking, I would like to dedicate the next 4 years to learning these things that I don't know. And if you have a proper approach and good instruction and a correct mindset, I feel like you should be able to do that. Probably easier to learn when you're younger, don't get me wrong, but you should be able to focus and train and do that in that window of time and gain a similar level of proficiency if everything's done right.
Very well put. And even kids that did youth wrestling, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to go to the Olympics.
Right.
Yeah, and you don't. Another big thing is you don't need all of these techniques. Okay, like you just look at any skilled wrestler that makes a transition to MMA. You know, you're not seeing 40, 50 different kind of takedowns. Okay,
No, definitely not.
right? Yeah, so you don't need to focus on a wider because of the interaction that you're going to have with your opponent. It's going to be completely different. Okay.
Right. Yeah, not to beat up on anyone, but like you look at somebody like Daniel Cormier, who has an excellent number of techniques that he's hit in his MMA career. Okay. And while, like he's got that high crotch lift he's really good at, he's got some clinch takedowns that he's really good at and everything. But Daniel Cormier isn't going in for like a low John Smith style single. He's not. There's a ton of techniques that are out there that those aren't in his selection of techniques, but he's gotten very, very good at the ones he has chosen to use. And
Right.
he probably used more in his wrestling career than his MMA career, of course, where he's got to contest with striking and whatnot. But like he's going to take a segment of the techniques that he knows, he's going to refine them to the highest possible level, and he's going to rely heavily on those probably less than a dozen total techniques.
You're 100% right.
Is that your approach to grappling as well, to basically master not so many quantity of moves, but a select few moves and just refine them and master them?
So this is a very yes but no question for me, and I'll explain why. If we're talking about me taking an athlete and wanting to teach them what they need to know for competitive success, then absolutely yes, we're going to want to limit the number of decisions that they have to make, and we want to set up paths that we're going to take people down where the athlete has the most experience and can minimize the number of reactions that the opponent could possibly have. We're going to become experts in our field, in the hopes that we do more reps than what the other guy could, offense, defense, everything. We know more about the game than the other guy could possibly know. Okay, so that's a very good approach for especially competitive athletes. I don't need my competitive athletes to be the most rounded. I'm way more okay with them being specialists, so long as they can drag somebody into their specialty by hook or by crook. Okay, like if you're really good at something but you can't manage to get there, you really do not have a very good technique base. Okay, now by contrast, and this is especially not a problem, but this is an issue for me because I'm still a competitive athlete, but I also teach a lot. My job as an instructor isn't just to teach my personal A game, because so few of the athletes I work with grapple like me because of differences in physical attributes, differences in body dimensions, differences in mental attitude about grappling. So it's my job, as an instructor, as a coach, have to know a very broad set of techniques in a more than passingly competent way. Because if I get a guy, like we were talking about Martin, if I was Martin's coach, and fortunately Tony was Martin's coach, but if I was Martin's coach, I'm not going to be able to do triangle chokes and head scissors as well as somebody who's taller and better built for them. But if Martin comes with those long, strong runner's legs, and I'm like, well, I'm going to teach you my favorite thing, despite the fact that you're probably going to be better at other stuff, I'm doing him a massive disservice as a coach. So to bring it all together, athletes wise, I want them to have generally a more specialized game and to take people into deep waters because they know how deep the water goes. But when we're talking about being on that coaching path, that instructor's path, now we still want deep knowledge, obviously, and we still want to have an A game, but I definitely need my guys to have broader knowledge, because they're going to have to teach people things that they maybe don't have an opportunity to be great at. And then if I have an athlete who, for example, triangle chokes, I got short legs, I'm probably not the guy that should be teaching people triangle chokes. But if I get somebody to the highest level of proficiency that I can with what I know, now either they have to take it to the next level of their own, or they're going to have to seek out somebody who can take them to the next level, who has those details that maybe I can't fully give them. So that's kind of my approach.
I agree with you so perfectly. And I tell people the exact same thing that you say. And not only, Nico, I tell people, a lot of people write me about the Tri-C or just training, am I too old? And I tell them, no, you're never too old to learn. And no matter what happens along the way, if life gets in the way or you have an injury, hey, now's the time to start learning these other techniques, maybe techniques that you personally won't do. But if you want to be a coach, you have to have this encyclopedic knowledge of what's out there. So yeah, as an athlete, as a competitor, as a fighter, you work within your window of skill set. But as a coach, you want to broaden your horizons. So really, like Javier hit on, there's something for everybody. And even as an athlete, once your competitive career is done, and you want to make the transition to coaching, well, now you can broaden your knowledge. I'm telling you now, you take the greatest coaches in any sport, wrestling, boxing, football, not so much, well, boxing too, but wrestling, football, basketball, there's always new plays being developed. There's new strategies being developed, and the coaches have to stay on top of that. Okay. So they can't just live in a time warp. And I see that in martial arts in general a lot, where people want to live like it was in the 1920s. They want to do 1920 techniques. Well, those guys would get blown out of the water by today's guys. They wouldn't stand a chance. Okay.
I feel like martial arts is particularly vulnerable to that. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. There's a lot of hero worship that happens in combat sports in general. I'm so not the boxing guy, but like, how many times have you heard guys be like, Ali in his prime versus Tyson in his prime? Who would you pick? And it's like, these guys don't even come from overlapping eras, really. Like how are you, like so many things have changed. Well, we do that in other combat sports, and like people will definitely argue adamantly in favor of whoever their personal grappling, MMA, whatever hero might be. Um, and oftentimes I think that's generally ridiculous. The sole exception to that, and I think this is noteworthy, is sometimes we will have rules changes in a given sport that may degrade the overall level of the sport. So, for example, I'm going to beat up on judo for a second here. When judo outlawed leg grabs, I was very upset because I felt that it took away from not just the techniques that judo athletes were going to learn and focus on, but I felt it did real harm to judo as a martial art, because now certain clubs, the clubs that focus on competition, they're not going to teach double legs, single legs, ankle picks, anything like that. You're going to teach fireman's carry, kataguruma, in an entirely different way. Some of that may create new and interesting innovations, but ultimately that also means their athletes are less rounded. They don't know how to defend those things as well. They're not going to have the ability to cross over into other disciplines, which obviously is more of a concern for someone like me who trains in a lot of disciplines than it is for somebody who chooses to specialize. But we're also shrinking the overall catalog of available techniques, and in my opinion, doing harm to the canonical knowledge of judo. And as a result of that, like, that's a big changeover. I might be able to argue, and again, we still have to like decide the rule set, but I might be able to argue like so-and-so judoka from such and such era before this major rules change was a better overall, more complete practitioner than this modern guy who grew up in this rule set that doesn't even allow you to touch the legs with your hands. And we Tony, I'm sure you could come up with an example in boxing or wrestling or football or whatever, where a major rule change might impact the I don't want to say caliber, because that's not the case, but like might impact the overall ability because a large number of techniques would be taken away.
Oh, sure. You hit the nail on the head, and that's, but then the modern guy, they're going to be better at certain techniques because they have less to choose from. So now
Right.
they got to become a little more innovative sometimes. But yeah, you can degrade things, and then, well, we're getting off the subject, but then you have equipment coming into play that can really
Certainly.
change things,
Certainly. Yeah.
big time, especially
Yeah.
in certain other sports. But, you know, um, for me, I was always wide open, and I always said, and Javier could tell you, the one rule in my gym is there's no rules. Okay, as far as techniques to use, there are none. Now there was rules of etiquette, naturally, but
Yeah. No actual gouging the eye, but you could put your elbow on my eye socket,
yeah,
like,
yeah, right. Just something, just so you know that this could, this would happen in a real world. This can happen. But beside all that, even if you live in a Pollyanna world where you're not going to get into a fight, or at least you think you're not, and you don't want to compete, so on. Well, don't you want to know what's really out there, what the potential is in the human body, what you can do? Uh, you know, that's what I was all about. These are the ways that you can manipulate a body, because there's only so many ways you can do it, right? But there's I think we talked about this the other show. There's a finite amount of techniques, but there's an infinite amount of variety and approaches because of your mind. And you have to develop your mind. You have to open up that, if you want to get philosophical or mystical, that third eye. You've got to open that up and start channeling and seeing things and looking at the body now as a canvas, a blank canvas. And you can create, you can do things, this and that, to the human body if you just have the right vision. And so many people have the natural ability, they don't have the vision. They're not shown the vision. They're not even aware that there is a bigger picture here. And that's sad.
Javier, I'd be interested to hear you compare and contrast like all the different grappling styles that you trained in. So what makes
Wow.
what makes Sambo different than I'm not really familiar with Sambo, but what makes it different than catch wrestling? I know they do a lot of leg locks as well, but
Oh,
is there a
well,
lot of similarity with the two
like,
arts?
so there's a wildly different approach to like, so, okay, first of all, uh, let's explain this way. Sambo is first and foremost primarily like the way the scoring is set up and the way the majority of practitioners play the game. Okay, Sambo is primarily a throwing art first and foremost. Okay, it is possible in Sambo to get a clean throw and instantly win, having never had to go to the ground to pin or submit anyone. Okay, that's called a total victory throw. It's similar, but actually harder to do than getting an ippon in judo. Okay, because the criteria for a total victory throw is I have to throw my opponent with power and control, landing him basically flat on his back while I remain standing. Okay, this is a big ask, but it's also possible to get one off of it. Not like that sounds like it's like just murderous throwing, but it's also possible to do that if you like just foot sweep somebody with like perfect timing and they land flat on their back and you stay standing. Okay, so I would say Sambo, for example, is a throwing art that has pins and submissions. And of those submissions, sorry, there are different rule sets for Sambo. We have combat Sambo, we have sports Sambo. I'm talking about sports Sambo right now, which is the jacketed based, strictly grappling art. Um, Sambo is a throwing art that has straight arm locks, so like Jujikatami or armbar, whatever name you know it as, and also a variety of leg locks. Now, the leg locks that they use in Sambo, and there's quite a few of them, but Sports Sambo excludes the use of heel hooks and toe holds. Sports Sambo also has some interesting rules that when you hit the ground, if the opponent is able to get back to a standing position, we reset to the feet. Okay. So if I go to say do a knee bar on you and you can simply stand up out of it, or an ankle lock or something, if you can lift me off the mat while I'm trying to arm bar you and stand up, we're going to get reset back to standing and get back into our grip fighting and try to throw each other again. Um, uh, judo
No
is again
chokes either.
yeah. Sorry to clarify, there are no chokes in Sambo, or at least again, sports Sambo. Combat Sambo is a different animal. It includes strikes, it includes a larger variety of leg locks. There are chokes, and there are also again different organizations that have slightly different rule sets in regards to the uniform and the allowable techniques. So but the main international style of sports Sambo is, like I said, primarily a throwing art that has joint locks and also pins. Now, the pins that are used in Sambo, we require basically chest to chest contact. We need to hold the opponent down for, I'm a little, I believe it's only 20 seconds to score maximum points. And pinning points do not inherently win you the match like they do in wrestling. Okay. And you can only accumulate those points from pinning once in a given match. Once you've reached the maximum number of points for pinning, you either have to go on to set up a submission and finish them with a submission, or they're going to stand it back up anyhow. Okay. So then we look at like wrestling, freestyle, folk style, Greco. Obviously the pin is a much faster count and is an immediate termination of the match. So pinning is a high priority, but a lot of matches are won with points acquired through takedowns, throws, and mat work. Obviously, the non-catch wrestling styles of wrestling don't actually have submissions anymore, although in their history they did have, and there still are a lot of pinning positions like the wrestling guillotine or twister, as jiu-jitsu guys would know it. The spladle, spread eagle, or banana split. These are all potentially submission holds that are still legal in like folk style wrestling and whatnot. They're primarily used for pinning the opponent. Jiu-jitsu, and again, there's a lot of differences between like gi and no gi, but jiu-jitsu has unlimited ground time. The onus is on the top man to engage, which is a real bizarre rules kink that causes some weird differences. So like if I pull guard and end up on the ground, okay, the top man is not allowed to like run away and ask me to stand back up with him. Okay. Whereas he would be the guy who's standing still would be considered the guy stalling for not actively engaging in a forward direction to try and pass my guard and get into a better position. Okay. Whereas, you know, when we see MMA athletes, the guy who's on bottom, if he's not actively holding down his opponent and the other guy stands up, he's going to wave him up and be like, hey, come up here, you know, stand and bang or wrestle with me. So, you know, like all these little variances in the rule set create a lot of different aspects of the metagame that changes from grappling style to grappling style. And one of the things I personally find most fascinating between studying all of these is finding the commonalities, like the things that work universally between all of them. That like when people talk to me about like grappling, whether we're talking jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, doesn't matter. And people use terms like basics and fundamentals. I see it in a very different sense because a lot of people are looking at it from like a single discipline point of view, and I'm looking at it from a multi-discipline point of view, where I'll be like, yeah, you know, that technique right there is something that's commonly taught in jiu-jitsu, so they might consider it basic, but it's actually not found or favored in any other style of grappling in the world. So to me, that's not a fundamental technique. That's a very jiu-jitsu niche technique. And I like seeing those, like the core of my game, or I try to be, is the stuff that I could do potentially in multiple different disciplines and multiple different rule sets. And then we learn more specialist techniques as we go into the specialist rule sets.
Wow.
So what are some of the techniques that you favor that cross over to like every art?
Well, I don't want to be like Evie. I don't want to say that, you know, like here's an example. Learning a good double leg properly with the idea of knowing how to do it, whether submissions or strikes are involved, is a great idea. But as I just explained, it's completely illegal in judo. Okay. So I could have a double leg that works in MMA, it works in jiu-jitsu, it works in freestyle, it works in folk style, and it works in sambo, but it's not legal in judo and it's not legal in Greco-Roman. Okay. So that's a technique that's worth it to learn in an overwhelming number of styles I would compete in, but would definitely have to be something I would have to take off the table completely in one of, well, I don't compete in Greco. I've only trained a little bit in it really, but like in one of the styles I have competed in, which is judo. So finding something that's truly universal, we start breaking things down to like some pretty principled details where we're talking about like pressure, footwork, you know, hand fighting or grip fighting. You know, we use those terms. You know, hand fighting tends to be a term we use in no-gi and wrestling. Grip fighting, you know, a term we tend to use in the jacketed sports, but the principles are very much the same. Okay, just the details change. So things like that are real foundational aspects of grappling as a whole, and then we have to adjust to get into the rules specifics. So you know, like let's use a throw that is legal in every single one of those sports. Okay, the shoulder throw, or ippon seonage, or flying mare, whatever you want to call it. Okay, where I grab the arm and I spin under and I throw you over my shoulder. Now, in judo, in sambo, in Greco-Roman, in freestyle wrestling, these are all super high scoring techniques because we're throwing the guy with force and impact, we're landing him on his back in a vulnerable position. And you know, that's going to be a big throw in any of those sports. In jiu-jitsu, that is a legal technique. Okay. But no matter how well I do it, it's only ever going to be worth 2 points. And in the process of doing it, I'm potentially exposing my back. Okay. So I'm not worried about that very much in a judo context, because we go to the ground and I slam him with the throw and it's over. I win. Okay. And I don't have to worry too much about the groundwork because we're allowed very little groundwork in judo. So while it's possible that guy could counter me in such a way that he doesn't fall and instantly lose and then could choke me, it's very, very unlikely. It's something I'm willing to bet on. Whereas sambo or Greco-Roman, I could do that exact same throw, and because there are no chokes, there's really no penalty for it. Sambo, I throw the guy, I could either total victory him or get 4 points for it, depending on how we land. Okay. And in Greco-Roman, like that could be a 5-point throw right there. Again, depending on amplitude and control and whatnot. But in jiu-jitsu, because I'll only ever earn 2 points and I'm exposing my back, this is actually a very risky thing, because if I don't throw him with complete control and land in a good position, if he like drags me down to the ground or maybe jumps on my back midway through the throw, now I have to contend with him on my back in a high scoring position. He might get 4 points if he takes and puts the hooks in and starts controlling me. And he might choke me out. So even though that technique is legal in all those sports that I just outlined, the risk versus reward isn't in favor of it in one of the sports, jiu-jitsu.
Man, you see, that's great explanation on it. It really is.
As a grappling athlete, especially like you, where you're doing all different kinds of rule sets, I gotta think it's confusing. Like instinctively, I think you're always checking yourself, like, oh, I better not do this, or it's got to be hard to switch gears, because if my go-to is the heel hook or whatever it is, that's kind of the pros and cons. I think it's great to have, especially if you're, I guess it's competing, as opposed to just trying to take moves into your game. That's got to be, how do you even contend with that? That's got to be a mind.
So there's a couple of methodologies that we can use here. One, and this is the trickiest thing, because like I said, jujitsu as a broad term has a lot of different rule sets. Okay, we have some very big rule sets that are very popular, but then we have a lot of smaller tournaments that use some variation, and it's very much a matter of like, you better read. Excuse me, man. Sorry. You better read those rules and understand what you're signing up for and know what is legal and isn't legal. But I've definitely made mistakes that have either cost me matches because I got disqualified or I suffered a penalty. So like, there's a learning process to this. One of the things I would say is, and it's going to vary from athlete to athlete based on how they train and what their methods are. But like, I wouldn't personally like jump into a jiu-jitsu tournament and then the next day go into a judo tournament. Okay. Like I'm going to prepare leading up to the tournament that I want to do, grappling with my primary rule set that I'm competing under in mind. Okay. As we, now if we're, like if we're doing somewhat related arts, this is an easy changeover. Like I did Combat Wrestling World Championships, and like I think a month later I did no-gi worlds for jiu-jitsu. Okay, and those two rules, different scoring and everything, but the actual technique selection that was allowed between the two of them, not that different. So I was able to focus on the same stuff. There was no problems with the difference in uniform. It's not like I was wearing a jacket for one and doing no-gi for the other. And so I was able to do those two competitions relatively close to each other and not feel like I had to take any time off between them to like reset my training methods. Okay. But it would be relatively challenging for me to do, say, a gi jiu-jitsu tournament under the IBJJF rules, which are very, very well laid out, strict, and you get a lot of specialists. And then immediately switch gear and do like an EBI format sub only no-gi tournament where, all these submissions are on the board and nobody's playing for points because it's sub only and there are no points. So that would require a significant paradigm shift. And I may need to take and do specialist rounds and specialist training leading up to that to sort of set my mentality right and make sure that I'm well trained for the rules. So, like, again, this is going to vary from athlete to athlete, but I would say if your core selection of techniques are legal and functional in the majority of the sports you train for, then you're only altering for the edge cases. Okay. But and I feel like I beat up on guys with this all the time, but like if you're a jiu-jitsu practitioner and you're playing a very grip dependent game, like a spider guard or a lapel guard or something like that, then suddenly going into no-gi, all those grips vanish. You're no longer manipulating the jacket in any way. And if you don't have a very strong no-gi game to immediately fall back on, there's going to be a bad adjustment period there. You'd be like, grabbing for stuff that isn't there. Your favorite counter to a particular pass may not work because you were dependent on a grip you don't have, or things like that. I find it not too difficult to go, like, again, when we have a related rule set, like it's easy for me to go, okay, I can't do heel hooks here, but I can do ankle locks. These are right next to each other. You know, I'll just make sure to set up all my leg locks, you know, that I do off this side or in this setup. They're all going to end as an ankle lock. But it would be pretty hard if like my whole game was based on, say, choking people, and then suddenly I enter a Sambo tournament. It's like, oh, by the way, you can't do chokes. So you have to prepare yourself for what you're intending to do with correct training. And, you know, like this is one thing I see a lot of guys make mistakes on, not understanding how to make the score. Like whatever your scoring techniques are, understand how the system scores them, understand what the rules are, and how to rack up points. Because like I take pride in, like, an overwhelming number of my victories are by submission, but I've definitely lost in some circumstances where like I got scored on and didn't make enough effort to score back. So like I've learned through experience, like that understanding what scores and how to make a score and how to, you know, nullify your opponent's scores, like all of that rules minutia has to be understood. And obviously the more sports you compete in, sometimes the harder and harder it is to keep all of that separate. So it really, like I said, really does help to ramp up your training as you get closer and closer to a competition by doing specialized training with those rule sets in mind.
That's a very thorough answer again. And he's right. I remember many years ago, we took a long ass road trip of over 300
Oh,
miles
I know where this is going.
to a tournament that when we got there, all of a sudden, leg locks are banned, you know, which was a.
No. Hold on.
All right, yes.
Yeah.
You say.
So this is I won't name the names or anything.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah. So yes, we took a long road trip. We brought a couple of guys up to compete, and going into this, I was a pretty confident leg locker. Like I explained before, I really liked leg locks, but I knew from personal experience and from rolling with other guys that did jujitsu and other martial arts, I felt that like my strongest offensive weapon was my heel hook. Okay. Like I had a decent ankle lock at the time, not as good as it is these days, but it was pretty decent and it worked off the same setups. But like I knew the heel hook was my game over move. And leading up to the tournament, I was just doing rounds and rounds and rounds of getting on guys' legs because I felt like most jiu-jitsu guys aren't good here. Heel hook's my best way to finish. And I was just had it dialed in. And we get to the tournament, and the promoter gets on the microphone during like the beginning of the tournament, and he goes, "All right, guys, show of hands. Who here considers themselves a world-class heel hooker?" And I'm not gonna lie, like I looked around and I'm like, should I put my hand up? Like what kind of a terrible question is this? Like I would feel so cocky. I would feel so cocky if I actually did, but I was like looking around, I'm like, is anyone else putting their hand up? Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And like I didn't, but also nobody else in that tournament raised their hand either. And he goes, yeah, I didn't think so. Since none of you guys are world-class at heel hooks and they're so dangerous, we're not going to allow heel hooks at this tournament. And like, I looked at Tony, I was like, shit.
I was fuming. I was so pissed because it was bullshit. It was another way of stifling what we knew. And he was the only guy that I trained that had any experience or was good enough. There was one guy who just flew in the day before from Sweden who knew nothing. But he came, you know, so he wasn't going to do anything. Martin had a broken nose and just had surgery, and he had to wear a mask, and he wasn't very good at that time. He was only with me for a very short period of time. So, you know, it was really all about taking Javier down there, you know.
Yeah.
And sure
so
enough. Yeah. Go ahead.
That was that was really shocking to me.
Well, it cost you the matches because you kept instinctively, Javier was getting on the legs. And they kept penalizing him. They kept taking points away. He ends up in third place, but it was bullshit.
Yeah, no, and that was a very weird scoring system that they had because I ended up in third place basically by losing less than any other person in the division. So like I lost my matches, but I didn't lose them by as bad of a point penalty. Like like that guy over there, he lost by submission. So he has like X number of points against him. I didn't get submitted by anyone, but I also wasn't able to submit anyone in that tournament either, if I recall. So yeah, I wound up with like the weirdest third place ever for basically not being dominated as badly as anyone else that was also in contention for third place.
Yeah, and I just found it because, like I said, these guys, even Javier wasn't with me that long, right? I mean,
No, I'd have to look back, but yeah, this was probably within the first maybe 2 years, maybe first year. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, first
Yeah.
year because
Yeah, it was probably 2000 or so.
yeah, and you know, and the whole thing was just very, very aggravating, and you know, yeah, I just said, you know, this was a waste. You know, it was a wasted trip, you know, because we came far. You know, we drove
Yeah,
a long, long way for basically, you know, that, you know.
And I would have like I would have gladly, because this was a guy that we knew, you know, it wasn't like just some random tournament that we just chose to enter. This is a guy that we knew through the grapevine and whatnot. I would have gladly competed at the same tournament and been fine with it if he had just been told ahead of time that they weren't going to allow heel hooks. Like I would have just focused my training on something else. Mind you, like again, all these years later, I regularly compete in rule sets that do not allow heel hooks, but I'm a much more advanced grappler and I have a wider array of techniques that I'm good at. You know, at the time I was like, haha, this is my secret weapon, and it got taken away from me.
Well, and the thing is, though, he was instinctively going to the legs, even though he knew he couldn't. He was still instinctively doing it because he was so well versed at it. That's all we were focusing on, you know. And I've seen it happen in other sports too, other things with different, you know, either with myself or friends of mine who are competing under a different rule set. They know the rules, but their instinct takes over. Yeah, it's a habit, and those things are tough to break. You know, that's why you want to get rid of, you know, bad habits if you have them. But in this case, it was a last second, literally rule change, a rule, you know, acknowledgement that, you know, it is what it is. You know, you have that. I've seen it. I mean, I've heard stories back in the 70s about karate tournaments pulling things like that, you know.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, there's countless examples in the fight world when we don't have like a universal rule set of people, you know, like managers arguing to get things changed last minute and, you know, things like that. So it definitely happens, but that was definitely one of those early days frustrations.
yeah, but you know, the thing is, in hindsight, it was, you know, a fun trip. We were all together. We did our thing. But you know, we were coming along back when people were just making up rules, just making things up, you know. And I had another tournament before I knew Javier, and I had two guys. And what did they do? They knew that. I mean, these were two really good guys. They pit them against each other right away. You know, there was no blind draw. They purposely did it. You know, so obviously, immediately, one of my guys is out of the tournament.
Right.
Okay, this kind of bullshit stuff. Brian Deneve was at a tournament, Southern Illinois, and he had his neck conditioned, so we knew that he could withstand chokes, you know, for about a minute. And they called out 15 seconds left, and Brian's dominating the match. So the guy gets a choke on him, you know, a guillotine, no problem. You know, 15 seconds is you're not going to tap Brian out. Well, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute. And then finally, Brian goes unconscious. They cheated. I mean, plain and simple. He called the timekeeper called out 15 seconds. The match should have ended after 15 seconds. Nope. Right. You know, because I even told Brian, just stay there. Were you there, Javier?
No. I remember that tournament. I was at the gym, but that was very early days. I certainly wasn't traveling around with you guys yet.
Total bullshit. Again, you know,
I want to say, like, some tournaments, like, this is a very rare rule. Some tournaments will have a rule where, like, if there's a locked in submission at the end of the round, they're going to let it continue until you escape. That. But yeah, like, that rule needs to be spelled out and very clear. And it's a super obscure thing.
Brian had steamrolled. I mean, people were coming up to Brian, you know, when he was after his first match or whatever, second match, he was looking like a stud. So, you know,
right.
I mean, Brian had this match won, and like I told him, just hold on, don't do anything, because 15 seconds, they're not going to be able to choke him out. It wasn't possible. And, and I was correct. It took a minute before he went out. And it was just, I think the guy may have ultimately apologized for it later on, like a month later on the internet or something, because I let him have it. It was just not a good thing. Just, and when you do stuff like that to other people, that's how your tournaments die. That's how you're
Yeah,
just not going to have,
it erodes the confidence.
it does. And even in pool tournaments, when there's some shenanigans going on, even before the internet, word spread like through the grapevine, just word would spread like wildfire. And next thing you know, people aren't going to come to your tournament because you job somebody, the
Right.
tournament's not on the up and up, calling in other people and whatever. I've seen it all. That's why you got to watch out with some pool tournaments. You don't know what you're really, getting
Yeah,
into,
even
but
like, not to name names, but even some fairly large organizations, certain regions they will do poorly in because they have a poor showing as a result of like repeated bad reffing or something, and people will stop going to that tournament in that region, and they'll just stop visiting that area because it's no longer profitable. I've seen it quite a few times before where it's like, yeah, that tournament no longer comes here. Oh, why'd that happen? Oh, we had this one really bad situation and people stopped showing up. So like even like a relatively large organization that could happen to. So it's always vital to have good reffing, even enforcement of the rules. Mistakes happen. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, I've seen it and I've heard it. I heard about it from a lot of people. It's a shame, but it's ego. It's all about pride. Um, one of my other guys, against my better judgment, entered a tournament. So you shouldn't. And I had the flu. I was so deathly ill I couldn't go. But it was just literally a joke because the guy that he fought, the referee was his training partner. The judges were all from the guy's school. I mean, if I was there, I would have said no match. There's you're not
Right.
unless you can submit them. And my student at that time was new, relatively new. Not I don't want to mention any names, but he wasn't
I mean,
ready.
I remember who you're talking about.
Yeah, right. He was by no way should he have been even competing, but yet he was still dominating this match, which was blew me away. But they wouldn't give it to him, you know, and they gave it to the other guy, the points, which was sad. But he got really discouraged. But I told him don't be, because you had no chance unless you tapped him out. And even then, who knew? Because I've seen now, my guys weren't involved in this, but I've seen where there were submissions and they were made to let go, and then they restarted them because the ref at the point just made something up because their guy that they wanted to win was going to lose.
Right.
So
I don't want to say that never happens. I don't want to say that never happens anymore, but like I have not seen something quite that blatant in a long time.
Yeah,
It wasn't ultimately like a bad ref call or a misunderstanding or something like that. But yeah, like certainly some of the larger tournaments that would be heavily protested. Hopefully we could get some type of overturn if something like happened. But yeah, that's a real concern. One of the things I tell guys, especially guys that are kind of new to competition, is like everyone talks about grappling as like an individual sport. And granted, like your personal performance is largely individual. Like you don't have a team out there simultaneously passing the ball to you and whatnot, like other sports. But at the end of the day, this is very much a team sport in terms of how we prepare. And when you step onto the mat, you're not just going against the guy that you're competing against. You are, in effect, facing two other people as well. And that other person is the ref and the opponent's coach. So you have three men that you're fighting in almost any given grappling match, sometimes more if we have corner refs and whatnot. Now, this is not to say that the ref is always against you, but my default assumption is the ref is not on my side. The ideal situation is he's going to be a neutral arbiter of the rules who's looking to protect both fighters equally. Okay. But I never assume he's on my side. And if you're not on my side, you're against me. Okay. And certainly the opponent's coach he's doing his best to make sure that his athlete sees every opportunity, make sure that the judge is going to score every point. We get very vocal coaches, sometimes come off as incredibly antagonistic towards the referees, but that's their job. Their job is to make sure their athlete gets scored for everything, even when maybe he shouldn't, So at the end of the day, you're fighting the guy in the ring with you. You're fighting the referee, not literally, and you're fighting against the guy's coach. So yeah, I tell most of my guys they're not fighting one guy, they're fighting three.
Yeah, it's a hard mind. It's not for everybody. In some schools, I know I've had students quit schools and tell me all they cared about was me competing, and I don't want to compete necessarily, or I don't want to do this or that. And it became more about the school owner or the instructor and his accolades than it did about the performance of the or the progression of the student. And for me, I want you to be the best that you can be. It's up to me to try to bring out the best in you. Um, and that's all that matters to me. And I think every school should be like that. It's like, man, you want to produce quality students. You don't need another trophy on your wall for your business.
I mean, granted, for a lot of people, that does look real good when you walk into a new school as a new student. You see a bunch of trophies and medals, but like, I don't know how to say this or like doesn't seem overly dismissive, but like your average new student doesn't know what any of that shit actually means. Like I could put my name and say, multiple time world champion and hang a bunch of medals and whatnot, but like that new student doesn't know whether my world championships are in anything valuable. He's just assuming they are because it says world champion. He doesn't know if that gold medal that I've got hanging on that wall over there is like from the hardest tournament in the world or the easiest one. So like at the end of the day, yeah, sure, that's cool stuff and it oftentimes impresses people, but then you get deeper into things and it's like, well, how much does that actually mean? Like, did you win a world championship in some nothing tournament? Is that gold medal from a time when there was like one other person in your division? So yeah, definitely not the thing that I would judge a school by, even though again, I feel like it's oftentimes impressive just in general to people that don't know anything.
And photographs is another one. Or I train with this guy or that guy. They like to name drop. That I cannot stand people who name drop. Now, if you just say it in casual, oh yeah, I worked out with such and such. But there's people who just make their living, their whole life, their whole career is based on having maybe one seminar with this guy, one with that guy, or the photographs. And and I won't mention the name because I think you're the guy that told me one very, very famous martial artist who, in essence, refuses to allow his picture to be taken unless you've been with him. You train with him substantially because I guess people were just getting their picture taken with him and then going back to their gym and claiming that they studied with him. I've had that shit happen to me.
I can't stand that. Like, actually, Tony, this is something that I kind of want to ask you and talk to you about. So, and this is, in my opinion, this is not a very cut and dry situation, but oftentimes people will ask me, like, what makes someone a catch wrestler? Okay. And for me, this is a very complex question because, like, on one layer, the first layer, certainly if you've competed in a catch wrestling tournament, you have some right to call yourself a catch wrestler as an athlete. You've competed under the rule set. Whether whether you actually know catch wrestling or not, you definitely have done some catch wrestling rules tournament that gives you some right to that terminology. And certainly if you've made an extensive study of a martial art, you've got that right, to call yourself a catch wrestler. But there's a lot of gray space between there where it's like, oh, I'm a jiu-jitsu trained athlete, but I use catch wrestling moves that I learned from this DVD, or I trained at a seminar, or took a couple of classes, or whatever, like all different things along the spectrum here. Like, are you bothered when people use that term and then you dial it in and you're like, how much of a catch wrestler are you? What are your feelings on this?
Yes, to a degree, yes. Let me put it to you this way. one day, and I'm not going to give the whole story. I'll give you two quick anecdotes that'll probably clarify my position on things.
Mhm.
I wasn't accepted or told that I was a wrestler, even though I may have uttered those words and I had to pay the price for it until Rodvan said I was, my coach.
Right.
And then years go by and I knew how good I was. And I felt, and I still do to this day, that there was nobody in the world better than me. I'm sorry, but that's, I think the test of time has proven that, at least in my mind, it has. And yet I never said I'm a hooker or anything. I never did. I just said, whatever. It wasn't until Lou Thez said, Tony, you're a hooker. Welcome to the club. So then I'm like, wow, it was the greatest, awesome thing. It was my gold medal. So that's how I would answer your question. You're not a catch wrestler or you're not a whatever until someone that really is accepted as that acknowledges you as that. Okay. You can call yourself whatever you want. Doesn't mean it's true. I had a tennis match once. I only played racquetball before then. I never played tennis before in my life. I had one match. I got smoked. Does that make me a tennis player? Because I actually I was in a tennis tournament and got wiped out right away? No. So for me, Javier, um, it's good to say I study catch wrestling or I study judo or this or that, but let it be to someone who's above you, somebody who's knowledgeable, who's acknowledged by their peers as exceptional. Let them label you. Let them say, you're a really good judoka or you're a jujitsuan man for sure. Um, Otherwise, it's tooting your own horn. And you know me, you knew me. Well, no, you didn't know me before I knew Lou. You knew me
Right.
afterwards.
Yeah.
But Bruce Lee knew me before, and Brian met me the same day that I met uh, uh, Lou Thez. Um, but yeah, I didn't go around calling myself a hooker, which for those of you don't know, that's it. That's the highest level there is. There was only I was only the fourth one alive at that time, and now out of those four, I'm the only one left alive, and hopefully I'll be alive for years. But it was Lou who gave me that honor,
Right.
that distinction, and that's how I think it should be. Like same with music. Yeah, you can say you're a musician, and if you're a jobbing musician, you're playing music, you know, okay, yeah, it's common sense. But you're right. Just competing or just having a little bit of exposure to it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a catch wrestler. You could be studying or learning it from someone. But yeah, I believe there has to be a level
Right.
that you reach.
Right.
I mean, and that's part of the reason why years ago when people told me you should, allow these people to open up these clubs, this and that. I'm like, well, if they want to study with me, if they're going to be under me, so I can teach them and open, so I know that if they're opening up a club, they're they're passing along legitimate, proper
Right.
techniques, then
Quality
fine,
control.
quality control, and they did not want to submit to that. They just wanted to have their. So a lot of people turned away because they knew that I wasn't just going to give them a diploma or give them the blessing to do it. So they searched until they found other people who didn't give shit, who didn't have the ability to really train them highly, but they'll just allow them to open up these satellite clubs and call themselves whatever. And it's not just limited to catch wrestling. Other
No,
styles,
certainly not.
they
Yeah.
have, and I was one of the guys that was true to my word. It may have hurt me in my business, but these people are not catch wrestlers. Their techniques do not stand up to the test of time. And I feel sorry for some of them that they don't know any better. They got sucked in. They believe the hype, but my guys never did that. And if somebody's that had one or two lessons or no lessons with me and is claiming to be trained under me, I'd like to know. And in the past, it has come to my not to my attention, and I've shut that shit down immediately. I just had to do it recently over the holidays. Okay, with
But
someone, yeah,
someone
who's
I know or no?
no, I don't even know this guy. I
Okay.
never met him. He just started emailing. He lives in another country. He just started emailing me, calling me coach and saying, I'm your representative and all this. You're not my representative. I never even met you. You never trained with me. He never even bought a video product of mine. and I let them know nicely in the email. Don't, if you're enrolled in my training program, I try see, even that doesn't allow you to immediately start teaching. You have to get to a certain level. Now you can tell people I'm training under Tony. That's the truth. But
Right.
don't just sit here and start saying, yeah, I'm with him, this, that. And that bothers me. So, and I, like I say, I know a lot of other people that have come to me and said, yeah, I went to this school. They claim to be catch wrestlers. They're a joke. Catch wrestling sucks. Yeah,
Yeah.
because of the people that you went to, are frauds. You shouldn't be going to them. Okay. You know how I get. I'm upset now because we've been putting up with this for years.
Right.
And the shit didn't really hit the fan until after Lou passed away, because now everybody claimed whatever they wanted to claim because, Lou put the hammer down, especially on guys that had nothing to do with me, old timers that
Mhm.
were nothing but jobbers or workers. And that's all they ever claimed as long as Lou was alive. Then once Lou died, then all of a sudden everybody was this superstar. No. So and I'm sure, Javier, that it happens in jujitsu and
It
in
definitely
judo.
does.
Yeah. But again, without mentioning names, I was told that there was a actual legitimate judoka guy had skills that was basically selling black belts. I don't know if he
Right.
still does. This is going back years ago,
No,
and
it's I mean, I won't name names, but before I had actually formally studied judo, I was basically told, because mind you, I had a jujitsu and a wrestling background, or Japanese jujitsu and wrestling background at the time. But I was basically told that, like, hey, send this guy this much money, you record yourself doing these throws, these submissions and whatnot, and he'll rank you up in judo. And I'm like,
does his first and last name start with the same letter?
no, no.
Oh, then there's another one of them. Okay.
I'm sure there's more than one, but but yeah, and like, I had no interest in that. I wanted to learn judo, and eventually I went to a legitimate club with legitimate coaches and did so. But yeah, I was just like, that what a horrible path to get to something, you know, especially something that should require as much work as, say, a black belt in judo or jiu-jitsu or whatever.
Oh, it's heartbreaking, especially when you're a judoka that, or like me with my thing that I love it. It's my life. Okay, it wasn't a business. It wasn't anything. It was my life. It saved my life. It was all I had growing up. I love this catch wrestling. I can say this more than anybody on planet Earth, anybody, because I've been at legitimate non-performance catch wrestling longer than anybody, and it's all I ever had. It pulled me through. It pulled me through my childhood. And then later on, the music was helped soothe me and everything. But so I am very protective and highly critical. But as you know me longer than Joe Cardinal. I'm not critical about other things. I can easily sit there and I have done this, brag about this amateur wrestler or this boxer, how unbelievable they are, Bill Wallace or
Absolutely.
this guy or that guy. But if you suck at something, I'm not going to sit there and say you're good.
Right.
And most people, when it comes to like the submission game, don't impress me. Now that doesn't mean everybody, but I'm hard to please because I've seen a lot of bad stuff. But when you look at like when Tyson was in his prime, yeah, there were defects in his thing, but he was so positive. He was so amazing and so, oh man, he could do things right. He was incredible. And there's been a lot of boxers like that and amateur wrestlers that just were, outstanding. And other sports, I watched some guys shoot pool that are just, it blows my mind that they're near perfection. But if you're not that good, if you're not at that level, I'm going to tell you, you know,
I have a very distinct memory. I cannot remember I believe it was a pair of brothers. You might remember the fine details of it, but they did taekwondo. And I remember coming into the gym, I believe we were still in Stone Park, and you were just ranting and raving about how amazing their kicks were because they had like sent you a training video or something like that. You're like, these guys are amazing, they're incredible, da 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 da. And this was in an era where already most people were like, Taekwondo is useless, it doesn't work in the UFC or whatever. And I just remember you going on and on about how, how incredibly accurate and fast and powerful their kicks were. And it was really cool, to like see you rant and rave about some other martial art that you were not a specialist in, and view it that way. And it just always stuck with me. I wish I could remember who it was that.
Well, I know who it was. I won't mention names, but yeah, he actually,
Okay.
last I heard from him, he closed his school. He became a New York City police officer.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, but he was just phenomenal. Yes, 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 and I actually still have a shirt from his school that he used to have, and he gave one to me and Kevin, or Kevin and I, and a pair of shorts. But yeah, that's just the thing. I'll give credit where credit is due. I'll even say on somebody that's generally not overall very good, but they may be good at something, and I'll say that, oh man, he's really good at this. But
Right.
this part, nah, not so much. But yeah, I'm not into this. I seen the best. Okay, I mean, you guys never were with Rod Von, and you guys didn't really know Lou Thez, um, and just some other people that I knew through the years that were just like phenomenal, right? At having in music or whatever else, pool. These guys were like as good as they get, okay, in the world in what they do. So I know what it's like to be around greatness. And I'm honored and pleasured in my life to say that I was around guys that were the very best in the world at what they do. And when you're around somebody like that, you cannot take mediocrity for too long of a period of time. And these world's best, they give off a vibe, man. It's just something about them. They have that quiet confidence. They're not meek. They're not like super, that's necessarily humble. They're not going to sit there and say, oh, geez, I'm no good. No, they'll say, no, I know what I can do. You have to have that confidence to get to that level, especially if it's an interactive thing. Like if you're a pool player, or a fighter, you got to have the confidence to know you can beat your opponent. If you're a musician, you got to know that you're good enough to play with other players that are, as good as you. Like if you're a piano player, you're good enough to play with Buddy Rich or somebody. So I've been lucky, man, and I've been lucky to know these people, and a guy like Angelo DePippo out of New York City, man. He's still going. He was in the movie The Godfather. He played in the wedding scene in the beginning. Great accordionist, maybe the greatest technique of all time. A famous arranger. He's worked with everybody in New York. Jerry Sigler, Ronnie Moon, Lou, Stanley Rodvine, you name it. I mean, these guys were the very best at what they did. How much luckier can I be? Maybe the rest of my life is shit, but at least I can
Right.
say I met these guys. And then I meet people like you and Joe and Nico and everybody else that have become not my students, but my friends that I'll take a bullet for and die for, and that I've shed tears with, and shit like that. Man, I'm lucky that way, but you're not going to get me to just sit there and say, hey, this guy's good. That's why I won't give out endorsements, man. Don't ask me, I won't do it. If I give out an endorsement, it's not because you asked. It's because it's the right thing for me to do. And I fully endorse you 120,000%, period.
Thank you. And let me just say that, through my travels and through my training, I've shared the mat with world champions in almost every grappling discipline on earth. I've trained with elite level athletes that compete in MMA. I've trained with Olympians in wrestling and judo. So to say that I've been exposed to some of the best guys in the world is putting it mildly. And that's why I just got to say that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, when I say Tony's got the goods, he's got the goods.
Well, thank you, Javier. I'm glad you didn't compare me to the female Jello wrestling world champion.
Well, Joe's still here online, so Joe, take it away.
Yeah, well, you got to acknowledge greatness when you see it. That's
Well, Javier has gifts, and I've bragged about Javier for forever. I just wish, that Javi could have met me when I was in my prime, when I was 20 something or whatever, or
I mean, you're 13 years older than me, man.
yeah, but you didn't meet me until after I had my aneurysm.
That's true. That's true.
I had that aneurysm in '93. You came along after that, so even
Actually,
up till then, huh?
I believe I've told people this before. Just back me up or correct me. you started training with Stanley at the age of 13, right?
Correct. Correct.
So that was 1976 or 77?
77.
Yeah. So I was born in 77. So I can literally say this about my friend and coach, Tony. He's been doing catch wrestling for as long as I've been alive. And people
Wow.
look at me with my level of experience and they're like, oh my God, you've been training grappling for over 20 years. And I'm like, you don't even understand. Yeah. So you've been doing catch wrestling as your primary art for my entire life. Maybe give or take a couple of months, depending on the timing, I guess. But yeah.
Well, that's strange. Yeah, that puts it all in perspective. And I've been doing it legitimately, not as a performer, like, professional wrestler and all that, doing it legitimately. But yeah, I mean, and that's just, well, I didn't realize that, boy, you really make me feel old.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't mind getting old. I just, I don't want to get totally washed up. A little washed up is fine, but not totally. But your body starts to betray you. But yeah, but no, I mean, again, to harp on it, I'm like the keep. I never thought this would ever happen, but I truly believe that I'm the keeper of the flame at this point because what I've seen out there is discouraging. Let's put it that way. And if that's what they're into, that's fine. Do it. But it's what I do is different. So I'm the keeper of my flame, of my style of fighting. And that's what I mean by that. And as long as you're around and Costa and some others that I've trained, Brian and, what have you, I'm sure that it's going to live on, even if something happens to me and either I'm not here or I just finally decide, hey, it's about time for me to make a living doing this. All right. Get into something else. But I'm better off for knowing you guys. I don't train people I don't like, and everybody I like or everybody I train is a likable guy. You know that,
right? Yeah, we very fortunately never had that problem at the gym, like where we had to be like, listen, you're not a good fit here. Get out.
No, it's happened, but yeah, but I won't.
Well, not with everyone long term though. Right, figured it out right away.
Well, what you can learn from me is literally how to kill a man with your bare hands quickly. That's not for everybody. Not everybody should know this stuff. Okay, period. I mean, let's be honest. Right?
I've straight up discussed this with people. Like given the martial arts in general here. I'm not calling out any one specific style or anything, but given what we do, it's kind of amazing that like nobody even does like a cursory background check on anyone. We just assume that when a paying customer comes in, that they're of good faith, that they're a good person. We're generally interested, but we're teaching them things that could be used in some pretty brutal situations. And if they're not a good person, that's a real risk in that. So obviously, for a commercially viable school, we just kind of have to open the door to everyone. And one of the benefits of the way that you've done it, which is much more like I always felt like it was more like an apprenticeship than it was like a strict like a dojo or other gym membership type situation. Like you have that opportunity to really know your guys and meet them and assure yourself that they are of good character before you say teach them how to choke a man unconscious or break their limbs.
Yeah, that's probably true. It doesn't help you financially. It ruins you. You can't, I had to make a decision to live way below a standard of living that I would have liked because it's not for everybody. The training is, right. It's very grueling and difficult, but yeah, I want to get to know somebody. I want to make sure because, when you start to get into this, yeah, this is stuff that you can cripple somebody or kill them. And I don't want to have that responsibility that I put my knowledge in the wrong hands. And conversely, there are forces or agencies out there that really need to learn from me as opposed to what they're learning because it's just going to jeopardize themselves, be it law enforcement or certain military organizations, because, those are the types that need what I have um, more than most people, but
While I definitely agree with the overall sentiment there, the one thing I would say, especially over this last couple of years, well, I guess really just the last year, um, like certainly there's a lot more restrictions on law enforcement now than ever before.
well,
If
that's
if,
why I think
if
they
it,
need what I teach now more than ever before, because I teach them how to control a person. Okay.
certainly,
Whereas
certainly,
that's what's lacking now. They're not studying, they're studying other styles that it's not about control. It's about, getting a position and looking for a submission. No, 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 no. You have to control. And I've always said this, when you know what I know, if I could impart that knowledge to you, the chances of you having to use deadly force go way down. It's when you don't know enough and you know just enough to be, get yourself in a dangerous situation. Now you're in a scramble and you're getting overpowered, or you're getting outmaneuvered, or you're dealing with such a hostile subject here that you're not used to in the gym. Now you may have entered into a situation where you're going to have to use deadly force, because especially in a grappling situation, you now put this guy closer to your weapons as a law enforcement officer.
yeah.
Let's stick with them.
I train with a number of police officers in various departments and at the various schools that I train at. One of the things that I've talked about is like, and I'm not beating up on whether we're talking judo or jujitsu or whatnot. Like most of them are going to spend an enormous amount of time in their gear with their duty belt on, and at no point in time are we actually rolling like that. Like you're in a
Right.
gi, or you're in your rash guard and board shorts and whatever, your no gi gear. So like I feel that if you're serious about using this for day-to-day operations, you should probably have some special training sessions that focus on like weapon retention, awareness, things like that. Focus on the techniques that you're legally allowed to do without getting yourself into trouble, which obviously precludes various choke holds and whatnot now. Certain pain compliance holds aren't even allowed that would have been taught just a few years ago on the force. So yeah, I feel like a lot of guys, obviously I'm not, I think just the act of training jujitsu or wrestling or MMA or whatnot helps prepare them for things. I think it definitely helps with dealing with adrenaline, and like doing live drilling is going to prepare them mentally for a lot of the worst case scenarios. Like nothing is worse for than somebody who's untrained getting in a bad position and not knowing what to do at all. But it's definitely horrible if they like lock up because they're not used to being underneath somebody. They get that claustrophobia or whatnot. But yeah, I think a lot of officers probably could do with technique and training methodologies that are tailored around the very specialist needs that they have and the situations they're most likely to encounter.
Yeah, we saw it when we were at Triton, where they were training some law enforcement officers, and the instructor even got a little intimidated. And at one point, he said, "Well, this stuff's not going to work against guys like him," meaning me and you guys. But
Yeah,
they were basically used to barking out commands, telling the suspect to do this, do that. Well, that's okay if they're listening to you,
yeah,
but
yeah. So long as they're compliant.
right when they're not, then it's on. But yeah, it's just look, the bottom line is, I've done what I've done. My best years are behind me. I'm looking to, enjoy my golden years, and we'll see what happens. But if I keep telling people, the best way to is the Tri-C program, because you can do this at your out of your own gym, out of your own house, no matter where you live. And as you know, we've had people from all over the world. I believe every continent has come at one point or another to train.
Right.
Um, I'm pretty sure it's been every continent on Earth has come to train somebody from there. But uh, with the try with
Antarctica.
no, so not that one. Although a couple of women have given me the cold shoulder,
That's true.
so they may have been from Antarctica, but
But
but yeah,
well,
no, I just
I was going to say with obviously this last year has been particularly arduous for people doing the kind of stuff that we do. lot of gym closures locally, across the states with COVID and whatnot, and even guys that may not have closed. Not all gyms are in the best financial condition because of reduced membership and the risks of exposure and whatnot. But hopefully, as this vaccine gets out there more, as things start opening up, we can start getting some more seminars. But something now, obviously, you've got the Tri-C program. We've talked about it briefly here, but with the advent and popularity of technologies like what we're using right now, Zoom, to do the podcast here, would there be any interest from on your end of maybe doing like an online, like a joint in class / online type seminar at some point? Perhaps we could
I
set
mean,
that up.
if we would practice it, because I don't have, it would be difficult. I mean, I could be an observer and try to, yeah, walk people through it. Um, Otherwise, I'd have to have a body here
Right. That's what I
and
meant.
another
Maybe get
body
one.
to run the camera. I got enough cameras and everything, but yeah, that's always a possibility too. I'm open to all of that. Um, and we're Joe and I have been talking about a couple other things, like a monthly membership thing where they'd get at least one video a month.
Mhm.
Stuff like that. But yeah, I don't see this year even being for the country to get back to normal based on everything that I've listened to and read,
Right.
especially like with the vaccine rollouts and everything. Dr. Fauci, you mentioned something in best case scenario that things might get back to quote unquote normal around November,
Right.
and then,
Pretty late. Yeah.
yeah, so this year for most people are going to be a wash. And I think it's going to, but yeah, with this technology, I mean, I could do a lot like the Tri-C is much easier now than it was years ago where people had to send me videotapes through the mail. Now it's just
Yeah.
upload,
Actual
download.
physical
Yep.
tapes. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I've got to do something because, I've said this before, I don't get any aid. I don't get unemployment or anything, and I don't work anymore. Last time I've trained anybody was, I believe, the end of February last year when I was in Chicago for the last time. And then COVID kicked in about March.
Right.
So,
Yeah. We
so it's been a
basically,
year.
Chicago basically shut down right around St. Patrick's Day.
Right, right.
So what
And
is that?
we were
The 17th of March or whatever?
right. So I think the last weekend of February is when I was in Chicago last. First weekend of March, we didn't, I don't believe we worked out. I'd have to look through it doesn't matter anyway. It's
Right.
still roughly a
Around that
year.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're already in February tomorrow. So yeah, it's been very, very difficult for me. And I know a lot of other people who own businesses that they're gone. They're permanently gone.
Yeah.
They'll never open up again. And not just martial arts. I'm talking restaurants,
Oh yeah. No.
taverns, small
Restaurants,
stores.
bars. Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like, I mean, uh, I feel like bars and small restaurants that didn't adapt well, because some of them were able to do outdoor seating during the better weather and so on and so forth. But like a lot of those, like I've definitely see a lot of businesses fold in my area, in the areas that I hang out in. So yeah, it's a lot of bars are gone. That's for sure.
yeah. Well, and yeah, and gyms too. I mean, I don't even go to I joined the Planet Fitness. I don't go because people around here don't take this seriously. And my mom has not been vaccinated yet.
Right.
So I'm not going to catch something and give it to her and
Risk
have it
bringing it
kill
home.
her.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't
exactly.
risk that. So, but I've kind of gone on a few rants tonight, but it's because you're here and all the trials and tribulations that we've gone through all these, 20, 25 years. I think I've been on the internet for 25 years, something like that. Yeah, 24 or 25, call it 25. Been through a lot, man. But I just love this more than anybody because it's my life. Okay. I mean, like you said, I've been doing this 43 years. I mean, when I think about that, that's uh it's going to be what, 44 years come this year. Okay. Yeah. Come summer, it'll be 44 years that I've been at this. That's just amazing to me. And you know, I'm highly defensive of what I've, of it because it's just, it's my life. and sadly, people who talk shit, if they would have just shut up and trained in 2 or 3 years, they would have had legitimacy and they would have by now been, well accomplished, as opposed to, dodging shadows when you don't have the skill to back it up, when you're running like when you're running on bullshit, you're going to eventually run out of shit. Okay. But when you have talent, I don't care what it is, talent in anything, you could be that quiet guy. I don't go on the internet and drop names or do anything. I don't market myself. I keep to myself. But I know that I have the talent. I know that you have the talent. I know that others have the talent. And they have their talent by just showing up. They don't get talent by berating people and making things up about other people. You never have. You've stood tall and look at you. You're a multi-time world champion. I mean, come on, that's fantastic. And you didn't have to create a tournament to become a world champion. You didn't have to try to, stack the deck.
No,
You
in fact, I take, and it took a number of years to evolve this methodology. I've talked to a lot of my coaches and friends that are also competitors, and one of the things that I wanted to do really was be able to prove that I could hang in, not every, because there's still tournaments that I haven't competed under their rule set, but could hang in just about any rule set, even when they're taking away some of my favorite tools, even when we're playing with elements that maybe weren't my strong suit. I wanted to be able to show that what I do could be tailored and adapted and could be effective pretty much no matter what.
Well, you mission accomplished, and that's what I'm so proud of you for, because you did it. And I remember many years ago, people kept asking me, start a tournament, and I remember you were part of it. Here's my rules, and they didn't even want to do it. They're like, forget it. So,
Right.
That's what a lot of people have done. They'll just start their own rule set so they can, stack the deck. You didn't do that, and none of the guys that I've trained have done that. And I've trained guys that fought in the UFC, Pancration, Sambo, different tournaments, and I'm proud of that. And weightlifting, and all of that stuff. For me, I'm proud that I was able to be the one-stop solution for a lot of people. You want to learn to strike? I can teach that. Da 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 da. I'm proud of that, but I'm most proud of the fact that guys like you took this knowledge, developed it for yourself, increased your enthusiasm and set your goals and succeeded. And others have as well. And that's what, that's just, I mean, I'm very pleased and I'm so happy for you guys. I kind of feel bad that I let my music teachers down. I never went anywhere with the jazz accordion. That's not their fault. It was 100% my fault. I feel bad about that, but they know how. Well, Ronnie's dead, but Jerry knows when I had that aneurysm in '93. He was there for that. That just killed me. That literally, not physically, almost did, but it just killed my music career because my fingers never came back. My memory, my brain was never the same. So that kind of pulled the rug out from under me. But thank God you never had anything crippling like that ended that for you. But you're an inspiration. Oh, is that your wife telling you it's time to eat?
That was me knocking on wood before.
Oh, knock on wood. Well, okay, but yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry too. I should apologize for getting hot under the collar with people. But man, it's just that until you walk in somebody's shoes, and I've gone through the ringer with people. That's why I stay off the internet. I just have my website, but I don't go to forums or anything like that. But I don't know. I just wish some of the old guys that I knew were still around, man. I really do, because the world would be different. The catch wrestling world would be different. The shenanigans wouldn't have taken root. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Well, I guess we should probably be hitting the trail there, Joe. You said you had this blocked off till 8:30.
Yeah, we got to dial in. But thanks, Javi, for joining in. It was great to have you, man. There's just tons of great stuff came up today. So it was really appreciated.
We have to have him back so we can talk happy stuff. Some of the fun stuff we did in the gym.
Sure, absolutely.
For sure. And
Yeah,
the
yeah.
pizzas.
I don't want to be like anytime, but like we could definitely set this up. Just as long as I know in advance, I can put some time aside and make it happen. So
And we have to
Glad-
talk later offline about the online seminars or something.
All right, guys. It was good talking to y'all.
Good
Yep.
talking to you.
Good talking to you guys. It
good
was awesome.
talking, and in this case also seeing. Thank
Yeah.
technology for that.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.